A little over 2,000 years ago, the Emperor of Rome, which is part of the Gospel for Midnight Mass, the deacon read that part in Espanol. Caesar Augustus was his name, Rome's first emperor after it ceased to be a republic. And he was very successful in unifying the largest empire in world history at the time. He ruled the entire known world around the vast Mediterranean Sea, from the coasts of Africa, Egypt, which would be south of the empire, as far east as the Black Sea and further, and as far north as the border of Scotland. And to celebrate this conquest and this large peacefulness, he gathered stole, if you will, giant obelisks from pagan Egypt, which were carved really thousands of years earlier when Moses and the chosen people were enslaved there. Caesar Augustus brought them to Rome. He would call his long reign, one of the longest in history, the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. He caused it. He celebrated his so-called world peace by using those obelisks to adorn not Egyptian pagan shrines, but the temples of the Roman gods, and they began to call Augustus by another title, Princeps Pacis, the Prince of Peace. That was his title throughout the world. Jesus Christ was born in Bethlehem during the beginning of this great Pax Romana. And later, after 3 centuries of growth, the Christian faith moved on to a Christian emperor named Constantine, and he would once again move the famous obelisk again. This time he would place the nicest of those tall Egyptian obelisks outside a very important church on one of Rome's 7 hills, the first church in the West dedicated to Mary, the mother of Jesus Christ. Because inside that particular basilica, right under the high altar this day, you can come and see it, is a shrine in which one can see a very small, decrepit, simple piece of barnyard furniture. It is, in fact, the manger into which Mary placed her newborn son as his first cradle on that first Christmas night. The obelisk, though, outside that Constantine put there has a huge pedestal which has a Latin inscription to tell people who approach the basilica what it's all about. And it speaks in Latin, but the basilica talks as though he was a person. He says, "I was carved out of pink granite to celebrate the pagan gods of Egypt. Caesar Augustus, who called himself the Prince of Peace, brought me to Rome to honor his pagan gods, but now here I stand to guard the manger in which the real and true Prince of Peace, Jesus Christ, was born and entered this world." We're about 2,020 years later, and the year we're in is about to end. And it has been, perhaps for most of us, one of the most depressing, confusing, and bizarre years, not only in our lifetime, but probably going back more than 1,000 years. This is going to be the top of the history books for years to come. We had a conflicted and dramatic election year. We've had shootings, riots, racist threats, statues being taken down, all kinds of negative events. You can hardly watch the daily news without wanting to turn it off because there seems to be something worse happening every day in 2020. The Romans would have called it the annus horribilis, a horrible year. And then you add on top of it, it's so obvious, we can't see it, but so obvious, the great cloud of this pandemic, still hovering over the globe for parts of the world, about a year now, for us over 9 months in Virginia, sheltering in place, lockdowns and so on. And it has a terrible negative effect because it instills a vague, very vague, general sense of fear, a threat to all. And of course, we're getting, I guess, used to the face mask. It become the new uniform for the whole human race if you want to stay safe. So for all these reasons and for many other causes I will touch on, people today are probably a lot more restless, nervous, agitated than they have been, perhaps even depressed. There is very little external peace in the world at this time. Perhaps no age really has been totally at peace. And for many, many people, there seems to be very little internal peace. which is what this is really all about. For many people, less hope. Will the new year of 2021 ever improve the situation? Now, for all of us gathered here on this beautiful Christmas morning, whether we're physically present in this holy place, the hall next to us, or watching from the live stream, and therefore they're participating from afar, there is much good news to celebrate. The Prince of Peace, the real one, born of Mary this day, is no longer found in his cradle or that manger, nor in Bethlehem. He traded the cradle for a cross at the end of his public life, because in doing so, he's convinced the world through all that proclamation of the kingdom, his speeches, his parables, his miracles, he has convinced the world of how to discover really true peace in the world. And so we realize that the peace we seek that will calm us down, cure our restlessness, it has to be a peace that will last. Caesar Augustus, the Prince of Peace in his era, did achieve the marvel of a very quiet civilization for a few centuries. But eventually the Roman Empire caved in for many reasons. He only kept the peace because he imposed it by military force, which is sometimes the last resort even today, to protect freedoms, and especially the freedom of religion. He imposed it in such a way that just before he became emperor, the great senator in Rome, Marcus Cicero, in a debate in the Roman Senate House, which still stands, he argued with Julius Caesar, Rome's great commander, the uncle of Augustus. And he says, when we Romans want to achieve peace, we level entire cities. We take their peoples captives. We wipe it out and level the ground. We create a desert and we call it peace. Well, that's not the goal of what God wants. That's how they had to do it, external force. Later, around the time after Constantine put the obelisk there, as the church grew in her golden ages, from her freedom, her ability to build her churches and celebrate her liturgies in public, and really Christianize the world. For even among many, many, many non-believers who deny the existence of God or the Christ, they do love the Christmas holidays, which we created through Christ. The other one was a man named also after Augustus. His name was Augustine, Saint Augustine from North Africa. His father was a Roman commissioner. Augustine was a brilliant man, handsome, tall, highly educated, and wealthy. He was a professor of philosophy. But throughout his creative teaching years, inside, he was not a man at peace. He was a very restless man. All his thinking and studying and teaching could not solve the meaning of life for Augustine. He was seeking the inner peace for many years. And he found this inner peace eventually in the person of Jesus Christ, because by this time the church was growing and flourishing. And at first he was turned off to the Christian faith because he couldn't center himself on a God from cradle to cross who could give his life and give meaning that would last forever. Christ, Son of God and Son of Mary. He was bolstered by his very Catholic mother, who kept praying for his conversion, and the great mentor, the brilliant Roman governor of Milan, who later became a Christian himself, Ambrose, Bishop of Milan. And so, studying the scriptures, he realized the vitality of Christ. This is a real person who somehow, even though he was crucified, continues to live. Perhaps the life of the resurrection. The child who came from Mary's womb cannot die again. He lives forever. How can I obtain that kind of life as it's celebrated in the Christian family? So Augustine, at the end of his long life, and his great writings survive most of them, wrote his last work. It was his autobiography, sort of a farewell, a sum of his life with God. He called it the Confessions. It's a very personal work. And he begins his Confessions with a prayer that explains why he became Christian. He said, "O Lord, my heart is restless, and it shall never rest until at last it rests in you." And he goes on for many chapters and pages to explain how it happened. All through his life, somehow the presence of God was there tapping him on the shoulder. the grace of God, giving him opportunities. And as a very proud and talented man, just slapped it away. Until one day he came to a crash and said, can't go on living like this. He embraced the faith after a gradual conversion and became one of the greatest bishops and shepherds of the church, centered on Christ. Now, we say that we came to Mass here this morning to celebrate Christmas. Many have taken a risk in doing so, and with our COVID protections and our good ushers and stuff, we're able to gather in safety again, as we have for 9.5 months. And it seems the numbers of people daring to put a toe in the water increases. We've come to celebrate Christmas, yes. But what we're really saying deep down inside each of us here is we have come here because we know where to find peace on earth. Not just in the physical building of the church, which is our holy place, our sacred assembly, where the Lord is Eucharistically present here more than anywhere else, but to realize he's been present in your lives for a long, long time, stirring your hearts to realize we only have recourse and the solution in him. So for us, we who know how to find peace, it's not an emotion that comes and goes. Peace is a person, not a movement. Peace is a human being who became flesh, a God, who comes into the world. So it's not an ideology, or as Augustine found out, it's not a philosophy either. It's a person who has taught us how he has overcome the world. And only in him and through him will we also overcome the world, no matter how dark, bleak, or grave it can become. We, long ago, have found Jesus, why we are his faithful ones. When the Gospels sing of the shepherds, the first ever to hear the good news, which is why the Gloria is sung always at Christmas and elsewhere, they heard, came, and adored. They found the center of their life. There they were. It was so beautiful. Later on, wise men, pagans, who had no religion but astronomy, perhaps it was Saturn and Jupiter's conjunction, discovered where the child could be found and realized this is the solution to every kingship and government on earth. We have found Jesus throughout our lives. It must be more than one day a year. It has to be a daily experience. The name in Hebrew, Emmanuel, means God is with us, not going to be or can be. He is with us. And we know with joy that he is this world's only hope for meaning, its only hope for purpose and lasting peace, and really the only hope for governments on earth who need to understand how to govern society, how to make human laws and deal with international affairs with the light of God shining on it. Justice comes from God. We don't create it ourselves. So this is Jesus for us, our salvation, our peace. We are told in the gospel that the birthplace, where the manger was found in a stable, is Bethlehem. And Bethlehem is a Jewish phrase that means the house of bread. The shepherd boy, King David, their greatest king, and very close to God, he was born there and made a king while still a teenage shepherd. Jesus was born there much, much later, and he has become for us the bread of life, which is why when we celebrate his birthday, any event, we gather around the holy table. For he who rose from the dead, who said, I'm with you until the end of time, fortifies us and nourishes our faith by allowing us to participate in himself. Christmas is a time when we like to give gifts. Perhaps you finished your shopping. Perhaps you'll receive gifts. What a joy. At the same time, on Christmas Day, it is Jesus who says, I'm giving you all a gift, the gift of myself, the gift of my life. That's what brings peace on earth. I'm giving you a sharing in my body and blood, and I'm giving you the fortification, the vitamins that build up in your soul and body the future resurrection you hope for. With such a gift, with such a promise, we can experience his peace always, no matter what's happening outside. And with Christ and in Christ, we will learn how to overcome the world.
Este evangelio nos describe el momento más significante en la historia de nuestra salvación, cuando Dios se hizo hombre en la persona de Cristo Jesús, nacido de la Virgen María. Este evento ocurrió en circunstancias muy difíciles. Debido al edicto de César Augusto para el censo de todo el imperio, José y María tuvieron que caminar como 80 millas desde Nazaret en Galilea a Belén en Judea para José inscribirse en su lugar de nacimiento junto con su esposa María. María probablemente estaba en su 9º mes de embarazo. La distancia que tuvieron que caminar es más del doble que de aquí, la iglesia de San Judas, a la iglesia de Encarnación en Charlottesville. Cuando llegaron a Belén tuvieron mucha dificultad en conseguir alojo en una posada y por fin hallaron a un patrón que les ofreció alojo en un establo. Y mientras estaban ahí, María dio a luz a su hijo primogénito, lo envolvió en pañales y lo recostó en un pesebre. ¿Se pueden imaginar nuestro Dios, Señor Todopoderoso, humillarse no solamente en hacerse hombre, sino que nacer en este mundo como una persona pobre, en lugar de ser el rey del mundo? En aquella región habían unos pastores que pasaban la noche en el campo cuidando de sus rebaños. De momento, un ángel del Señor se les apareció y se llenaron de temor. Pero el ángel le dijo: no teman, les traigo buenas noticias que causarán gran alegría a todo el pueblo. Hoy les ha nacido en la ciudad de David un Salvador que es el Mesías, el Señor. Esto les servirá de señal. Encontrarán al niño envuelto en pañales y recostado en un pesebre. De pronto se le unió al ángel una multitud del ejército celestial que alababan a Dios diciendo: gloria a Dios en el cielo y en la tierra paz a los hombres de buena voluntad. ¿Reconocen la frase? Cada domingo al principio de la misa oramos: gloria a Dios en el cielo y en la tierra paz a los hombres que ama el Señor. Y continuamos: por tu inmensa gloria te alabamos, te bendecimos, te adoramos, te glorificamos. Tal como los pastores alabaron y glorificaron al niño Jesús. Y este es el gran evento que celebramos hoy.